My 8-year-old granddaughter, Brooklyn, had a birthday this last month, and so we made this little heart for her for a present. Today we're going to learn how to make a heart for Brooklyn. Materials you're going to need to make this heart is 20 gauge wire, 3 pieces, 6.5 inches long, all dead soft. I have 4.5 feet of 28 gauge copper wire. And then we're also going to need 3 or 4 crystals, 3 to 4 millimeters, and then 3 different jump rings and a clasp. Tools that you're going to need: you're going to need a pair of wire cutters, preferably flush, at least a pair of chain nose pliers, and there are various other pliers that you might be able to use or need during the project here. You're also going to need a ruler of some sort. Now I've put the 28 gauge wire onto this bob and it makes it a little easier to handle. Quite often I'll work right off the spool. This is 4.5 feet of 28 gauge dead soft wire. Now before I begin, I use steel wool to clean the oxide and just to degrease and make the wire a little cleaner to work with. It also, using the steel wool and pulling the wire, also tends to straighten it, which makes it a little easier to work with. We're going to start first with one of the 20 gauge wires, and we're going to take the 28 gauge wire and leaving about a 1-inch tail, we're going to wrap the wire, the 28 gauge wire, around this wire 2 times. We'll add a second wire above the first and wrap it once around the 2 wires, bring it down the back, and then bring the wire between the 2 wires back out to the front. So it's looking like this. Now we add the 3rd wire above the other 2 and wrap the wire over the top, covering the 2 wires. Bring it back down to the bottom and over the bottom 2 wires. Bringing the 28 gauge wire between the top and the middle wire, and then pull it down and bring it between the bottom 2 wires. So we've got this little peak going. So now we're just going to continue this, repeating it. Over the top 2 wires, down the back, up over the bottom 2 wires, pushing it in, and bringing the wire back to the front between the bottom 2 wires. Sometimes helps if you bring these wires out to about the same distance and separate them just a little bit. The other thing that helps is making sure you're holding this wire up close to where the weave is. It keeps it so everything is straight and flat. All right, over the top 2 wires, down the back, over the bottom 2, bring it back to the front, between the bottom 2 wires, and push things back together. We're going to continue this for just a little bit. And get a good weave going for 1/2 inch, 3/4 of an inch. Bringing some off the spool as we need it. Trying to keep things nice and even and pushed together. And you can occasionally bring in your chain nose pliers and just kind of even it up and keep things nice and tight. Over the top, around the back, along the bottom too. Now, after you've got, a certain amount of the weave done, we want to pull the wires out so that we have just 2 inches of wire down here at the beginning on these 3 wires. So we may need to use the pliers on this. Bring the ruler in, and we're just about 2 inches on that one. Pull the other 2 wires through. Okay, now that we've got about 2 inches of wire there, I'm going to bring my pliers and just flatten this out a little bit just to tighten things up. The center wire tends to pull forward on this particular weave. So we'll just squeeze it down together, and this will lock it in a little bit too. And then we're just going to continue the weave until we've got 1.5 inches of wire weaved onto the 3 wires. It's important to keep these wires separated a little bit, and to keep things tight. If you find that center wire starting to push forward, just come down and with your pliers push things in tight and then squeeze them all back together. Okay, we're about 1 inch now. Okay, we're now at 1.5 inches. It's just a tiny bit over, which is perfect. You don't want it to be any less. So what we're going to do now is we're going to finish this up with 2 wraps around the bottom wire. We're going to take this top wire and just kind of pull it out of the way. And then we're going to do 2 wraps around both wires. Just like that. And then we're going to follow this with 2 wraps around just the bottom wire. And we're going to repeat this 2 over both. And then 2 over the bottom wire. So you'll just repeat this 2, 2, 2 until you've got 1 5/8 inches of this weave. Try to keep your wraps consistent and together. You do that by keeping tension on the wires and by keeping them in nice and close together right from the beginning. If you need to, use your pliers or your fingers to push them in. So you can see that the first weave, we've got 1.5 inches, and the second section is about, we've got it at 1 5/8 roughly. We're going to leave the wire on this side just in case we need a little more, but there's no reason we can't trim the tail off here at the beginning. We'll take that and just fold it down. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to begin shaping the heart. We just kind of take it around. And you want to keep this thing curved a little bit towards the outside. Give it kind of a half heart look. Work on it a little bit. Let's take this little single piece. We're going to bring it down into a curve, and we'll take this second portion and just follow it along with that single wire. And again, these weaves tend to roll a little bit, and I like to keep them so that they roll to the outside just a little bit. If you keep the wire, if you hold it down here a little bit, once you've got that initial thing done, you tend to get less kinks. But the weave portion, let's bring it down. We'll work both sides a little bit. Keep nice curves. Try to keep the two sides so that this heart isn't lopsided. It's starting to look really pretty good there, isn't it? And it looks like to me we may it wouldn't hurt to do maybe another couple of weaves down here on this side. We can probably pull that off, but just to be safe, let's do a couple more. I'll just bring the wire back, pull this wire up out of the way. Looking good. Okay, the first thing we're going to do is we've got these crystals, and we're going to put these on this wire. Just slide them down. These are 3mm rounds. They've got kind of a rainbow finish. If I was going with 4mm, I'd probably only do 3, possibly 4, just depending on the look I'm going for. But you want about 12mm worth of crystals on here. Now, as we're working with the wires, those are gonna tend to slide around. So I'm going to put a little bend down at the end, so we don't lose the crystals and have to go hunting for them. Okay, let's form up our heart a little bit. Make sure everything's going to be where it needs to be, and the shape is what we want. Looks pretty good to me. So we're going to cut this loose wire off. Back here in the back. Let's make sure this is curved the way we want it. And I mean, you can curve it, you know, however you'd like. I like it to, you know, to kind of sweep down, kind of like there's a slight S here at the end. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to take my pliers and grab it right there where the weave starts, and I'm going to bend it around those other wires. Let's make sure the crystals are all up there inside the heart where they need to be. And then come to the back, and we'll just fold this down. And tighten her up. Now these two inside wires, we're going to just kind of, they're just going to be like a little feature here in the back. But this third wire, we're going to trim it off about probably about 1/8 of an inch past where it overlaps this other weave. And then we're going to take the chain nose, or I have some needle nose, or these tweezer nose pliers here. I'm going to grab that and just fold that end under. So it just kind of locks in these other, you know, the 3 wires from here. And these 3 wires, I'm just going to bring those up. Over the top. So they come up here, and we'll squeeze them down, and we kind of want to make sure that they're hidden back behind. And so we're going to cut those off about again about 1/8 of an inch past where they overlap that other weave. And take your fine nose pliers, and we're just going to bend those down. So they kind of come down It's going to be really tight, but we're going to bring them down so they're somewhat underneath this other weave. But the main thing is just to get those points out of the way so it's not going to poke into anybody. Okay, it's looking good. Now back here in the back, we're going to take these two wires and just a little above where it passes the heart, we'll take this first one and we're going to grab the end and we're just kind of do a little open spiral. Just kind of push it into that coil. And this other one, again, we're going to cut it a little bit. Cut it just above the heart. Don't cut it too short. If we have too much, we can always coil it. And just to show you that the chain nose are just fine for this, do a little tiny coil in the end and then bring it down. Bring it down back behind. Just like that. There's what your heart's going to look like from the front. Now we've got 3 jump rings and some chain that we need in order to finish this up. We're going to start with the largest jump ring. I really should have grabbed a pair of flat nose pliers on this, but we can do this. Okay, twist open your jump ring. There's a little bit of a gap, so we're going to push in till we hear that click, which means the 2 edges are together. We open up the jump ring and we're going to bring it through the 1 coil over the weave here at the top, and we'll close that jump ring back up. There, you hear that scraping, that clicking sound. That means the jump ring edges are back together. Let's make sure that it's all straight. And there we have a jump ring bell for the heart. I also have a clasp to go with this. This is a clasp that I've made. Probably in a later class we'll show you how to make that. We'll fasten the clasps to one end of the chain by opening this smallest jump ring. Let's just twist it open. And put the jump ring through the end loop. I'm using kind of a fine chain here, so it's going to be kind of tight. Put the clasp on. Close that jump ring up. There we go. This large jump ring, I believe, is 7/64. It's a 19 gauge, 1 millimeter diameter wire. I probably could have used a 1/4 inch, would have been fine. I wanted this to be kind of tight. So I've got 7/64, but that's not always an easy size to find. And so a 1/4 inch would have worked just fine. The small jump ring is an 1/8. And then for the other side of the clasp, for this ring that we're hooking the clasp into, I believe this is a 3/16. It's also 1 millimeter. So we'll open that up. And slip it into the final link on the other side. Check the jump ring from the top, the side, make sure it's all there. There we go, there's the clasp. There's our heart for Brooklyn. All complete, ready to put a patina on it, put it into the liver of sulfur, and then polish it up, and we have a nice antique finish. Now, if you enjoyed this video, I would encourage you to subscribe, also hit the like button, and we'll have another project for you soon. Thank you.